Okay, nobody's on camera, except Steve. Before we get started, so we have financial wellness tonight with Steve Pietila. This is part of a series of programming surrounded from the Community Connect Fostering Digital Access initiative from the ALA, the American Library Association. Through this initiative, we were given 5 laptops and 5 hotspots to circulate, and along with that, we are providing financial literacy, digital literacy programming, as well as programming, about the Affordable Connectivity Program, which helps people get affordable internet or phone service. So if the rest of that does not apply to you, or you maybe know somebody it does, we have some sheets on the tables with our upcoming programs associated with that initiative. All right, without further ado, I will turn it over to Steve,
yes,
our expert.
I think probably got coerced since his wife was. What do you think about it? Think there was a little coercion?
Well, she emailed me, she said, who'd be the best person in town to do something?
Oh.
I said, of course I would be the best person. I am Steve Pietila. I have many initials behind my name. Those I will, just shut it off. I'm a wealth and trust officer.
Probably got coerced since his wife was. What do you think about it? Think there was a little coercion?
Well, she emailed me, she said, who'd be the best person in town to do something?
Oh.
I said, of course I would be the best person. I am Steve Pietila. I have many initials behind my name. Those I will, just shut it off. I'm a wealth and trust officer and a vice president at First Dakota National Bank. 11 years of experience. I have those CTFAs and APMAs and whatever other, I could get as many initials as a person wanted in the financial service industry. But basically you pay for those and then you have to take some continuing education credits every year to keep them in force. This is my disclaimer, right? I have to give this disclaimer before I start, and I better say it into the camera as well. This document is general communication being provided for informational purposes only. It is educational in nature and not designed to be taken as advice or a recommendation for any specific investment product or strategy presented. I'm not an attorney. I can't give you any legal advice or any of that either. So, my mission statement for this is to provide you with undeniable facts, proven formulas, and actionable tips. It might hope to motivate all of us to quit making excuses and start practicing simple financial habits that will significantly improve our overall quality of life today, tomorrow, and throughout the rest of our lives. So that's my mission for this. We'll go from budgeting, debt management, all the way to investing and estate planning in an hour or less probably. You know, I want you guys to have some, if you have questions, I want to open up to questions. So I hope to have this done in 30 minutes. So you're taking Finance 101 in 30 minutes.
You get college credit for that?
You get 30 minutes of college credit. So 0.05 of college credit. So I always like to come up with numbers and steps, right? Just kind of analytical that way. So, you know, a simple financial plan is just this. What's the money going out? What are your expenses? You know, what are your current assets? What do you currently owe to others? What's your debt? How much are you able to save a month? And we can talk about that in a little more detail. And then if you are saving, how are those savings allocated and how maybe they should be allocated? When do you plan to retire? Most people have that number in mind. Is it reasonable? Is it right? Unfortunately, a lot of people say they're going to work till 65 or 67 or 70 and a health issue comes up and they are forced to retire because they just can't keep working. The hardest question for people to answer is, what's your life expectancy? It's easy to build a financial plan or a retirement plan for somebody. If they could tell me the day they're going to die, I could say you could spend this much money until the date of your death and you'll be worth $0 and you can exit this life, you know, with no money. But unfortunately, we don't know what our life expectancy is going to be. And you know, typically, if you live to 65, you're likely to live to 85. So you can't just take the average life expectancy and say, that's my life expectancy. It really depends on a lot of factors. You know, this little chart here is, you know, take some action. What are some things we can do to control the future? Well, there's certain things that matter, right? Family, loved ones, and there's lots of things that don't matter, and there's things that we can control, and really we should focus on the middle, things that we can control and things that matter, and in there, that's kind of what a great financial plan would be. You know, pay yourself first is really talking about, okay, if you're gonna live till let's just say you live till 95. Think about, you start work at 20, and you work till 65, you've worked for 45 years, you now need to live off of that money that you've saved for another 30 years, right? If you're gonna live till 95. So you need to consider how you can pay your future self by saving for retirement, saving for the unexpected things. And I think that's difficult for people. If you're making, you know, $20 an hour and paying $1,000 in rent, it's tough to budget around all of that. The only successful way to budget is, to me, is to write a budget, right? I mean, it doesn't have to be written on paper and pencil, but it has to be typed out, has to be reviewed, has to be understood what you're spending your money on, and then you can review it and say, okay, where can I save? If you don't have a written budget and it's all in your mind and you're just running your credit card and your debit card, and at the end of the month you're left with nothing or you're overdraft, you're not following good principles, you're not taking good actions. So a good written budget is a great process to hold yourself accountable. 3, you need to establish goals, right? Professionally, personally, and in finances, you need to have some goal. If it's, today it's maybe save 5% of my income for retirement. Next year, maybe it's add 1 more percent to that, 6%, 7%. But if you don't establish any goals, it's difficult to understand what your budget's about. And your goals should really be about the things that matter. So, just a consideration. You know, of course, I suggest you work with a professional. Most professionals require that you have money to work with them, though, too, right? So, we don't work for free. So, if you're in a situation where you're struggling with your finances, it's tough to find a professional to help you. There is debt counseling resources, there's credit counseling resources, and things like that, usually through some nonprofit organizations. I think of like Lutheran Social Services has a credit counseling. So those people can help you. You know, if you have money, there's plenty of professionals that want to help you, right? And then you've got to find one that you like, one that you're comfortable with, one that you trust, one that can explain how they do get paid and explain their fees. And if you're working with somebody, the expectation, you're paying that person to work with them, they should be more than willing to meet with you at least annually, right? That should be their expectation. That should be your expectation, that you visit annually and update your financial plan. Lots of things change over the years. Rates change, interest rates change. Yes?
Is there like just a standard professional fee or how, just ballpark?
There's all different kinds. I mean, there's advisors that work on a fee basis of accounts under management, so that's usually a 1% fee, somewhere around there.
Okay.
If you're paying more than that, we usually say you don't pay more than 1% for financial advice in that kind of manner. There's other financial advisors that are commission-based. They sell you products, could be mutual funds, could be annuities, could be life insurance. They sell those products and collect a commission off of those products. Those are often more expensive up front, because that's how they're getting paid, is that initial commission, but they do have some ongoing fees too. I would say whoever you work with in a professional capacity should be able to tell you how they're paid and what their fees are. And if they're not willing to share that, then I would have an issue trusting that person to be managing my finances.
Sure.
So to take action, I mean, the first step, and I printed these off for a few people here, and Kelly, I'll just give you these. You can hand them out if you want to people. But this is a monthly budgeting sheet. I came up with. Yeah. You know, if you email me, I can send this to you electronically as well. My email's on the very back bottom of this. It's kind of small on the screen up here, but you can see I put everything that a basic household would expect to pay for. Loans, insurance, if you like to give gifts to charities, if you're going to save for investing, taxes, travel, vacation, all of that stuff. On the back is the income, so that's your step 2. You put what you expect to make, and then at the end of the month, you take your total income and minus your total expenses, and you come up with what the difference was. And the next month you start over. You can set your budget off of what you spent this month. You can start thinking about things you would spend money on in future months. It's really handy to have this in an Excel format instead of on paper, but if you're coming up with negative numbers consistently, you're going to have serious issues, right? But if you're starting to come up with positive numbers, then you can start considering, okay, is there ways I can pay down debt with that positive number? Is there ways I can start saving for the future with that positive number? You really can't understand that until you've written it down. And it gets to be kind of a challenge to see, okay, what did I expect to spend on food in September? What did I actually spend on food in September? And unfortunately, lately, it seems like what you expect to spend on food gets to be twice as much as what you anticipated. And so that's been a big problem for people with inflation. Gas is getting more expensive. Property taxes, insurance, all of that stuff erodes our wealth and our spending power. But this budget, to me, is really your first step. If you're going to want to improve your financial situation, you have to start with a budget. And then you can really understand if you have a positive cash flow. And if you have a negative cash flow, then you need to consider some things differently. Use both your head and your heart in making financial decisions. I'm more on the head side of things. I think they have to be, everybody makes decisions based on emotion, right? If we're hungry, we need to buy food. It's just what food do we need to buy? Is it go spend money to eat fast food for $12 an hour? Or is it, pack a lunch and save and spend $4 on a bologna sandwich? It's really just kind of where you need to use your head at every expense, especially if your budget's not looking good. The latte factor, I think we've all heard this comparison, but if you spent $6 3 days a week on a latte, you're spending, I did the calculation now. I said $6 a week, and there's a book called The Latte Factor too. But $5 on a latte 3 times a week. So 3 times a week you stop by Starbucks or Scooters. You're spending $780 a year on coffee. When you could drip coffee at home, maybe not as good, but again, if your financial affairs aren't in order, those are the kind of things that you have to think about.
Depending upon where you live, that could be a house payment or rent.
Yeah, could be 1 month of rent, right?
That's crazy.
Yeah, exactly. And there's other things we spend money on. I think my generation and streaming services that you maybe don't even use. It's tough to cancel subscription services because you think, oh, maybe I'll use it next month. And then pretty soon after 5 months, you spent $10 a month on a streaming service you never used. So, 3-bucket approach, I'll talk more about the 3 buckets. Your credit history, from a banker's perspective, credit scores are really important to bankers. I don't do loans, but it's kind of the reverse way it works, right? The better your credit score, the better opportunities you have for lower interest rates. Easier to buy homes, easier to get the lowest rates possible from all the lenders. So a credit score is important. Does everybody know their credit score? Don't have to raise your hands, but if you don't know your credit score, it's free to look it up. And you can get your annual credit report for free. It's really easy name to remember, annualcreditreport.com. You can get a report every year from that website. From all three of the credit agencies, I believe, is how you can do it too. So, you should know your credit score. Lots of credit cards nowadays will show you a credit score. Not bad to have a nice, easy score to save yourself on, credit card debt.
How can it fluctuate so much when, like, my Discover credit card score, I notice fluctuates, and I'm going, I don't know why it's fluctuating. It'll fluctuate anywhere from 813 to 830.
Yeah.
And I have made same purchases primarily, pay it off with no interest assessed,
Right.
but it fluctuates that much.
Yeah, I mean, it's usually on available credit, and then how account history, how long they've been open. So sometimes if you use a lot of your credit up, that available credit will get crunched smaller. And then when you open that back up, pay it down, then the available credit opens back up, and that increases your credit score. But if you're over 800, I won't worry about whether it's.
I know,
right.
I was just wondering. Also, is it true that your credit score goes down if you continually request your credit score?
Yes, yep, every time your credit score is viewed, so if you went and got a loan from a bank, they would run your credit score, and that would lower your credit report that you're continue to do that, yeah.
Why use that though?
I don't know, it's a great question, I guess they think you're
Up to something?
up to something, yeah. Yeah, and it's odd, you get punished if you close a credit card, right? Because you've shrunk your credit down, and you've maybe shrunk your credit history down too. So if you open a Discover credit card when you're 18 and one day you decide I don't want it anymore, but you haven't opened another credit card since 5 years ago, all of a sudden your credit history or your longest credit went from 35 years to 0 years or 5 years. And they give you, so the credit score is sometimes it's not the best measurement of the quality of, it's not the best measurement of your quality as a financial management tool, but it is how creditors, lenders, review your credit. So it's important, but it's only important if you're going to take a loan. If you don't ever borrow money, you don't need a good credit score. It doesn't really matter. So
I know I was going on that credit report, and my son says, you better stop checking your credit. And I said, what? He said, every time you check your credit, your score is going to go down.
No, not if you do it that way.
No?
That's if you went to a lender and they had to check your credit score. If you go to this website and do it, you're not
It's not
affecting
going to
your credit.
fluctuate it.
If you look on your credit card, you're not affecting it at all.
Okay.
Your credit card, at least mine does, will show you why your score's changed. If you click on it, further detail.
Further detail.
Yeah, yep. Here's debt reduction strategies. Again, this is kind of the basics, and this sometimes it seems like common sense. What you do if you would have high credit card debt is really there's a couple ways to look at it. There's Dave Ramsey's way, which is a good way too, but this one is a little different. This, you look at the highest interest rates. So whatever credit card has the highest interest rate, and you start paying that one down first. Dave Ramsey says pay down the smaller balances. Right. Doesn't matter what the interest rate is, just pay down that smaller one, so then you can snowball that into the next one and into the next one. Both really are fine. It would make the most sense though, if you're paying a higher interest rate, to pay that first. It's just the success of the debt snowball keeps people motivated to pay their debt off.
That was one of my questions. What about Dave Ramsey's philosophies? Do you concur with them, or?
For the most part, yeah, they're good philosophies, right? I mean,
I think so.
Pay your debt off, figure out how to pay it off, come up with a plan. Whether it's his plan or the reverse, which is not necessarily the reverse, either way, you're making payments towards debt. It's just typically efficiently paying high debt off first would make the most sense because you're reducing your interest rate payments every month. But he does the reverse of that, saying pay the lowest balance off, so you feel more successful as you climb that debt snowball.
I would think most people would go with, I really think I need to pay the higher interest pay on that one. I mean, doesn't mean, that's logical.
It is logical. His is more emotional, right? It's saying, I've paid off this credit card. Now I'm not writing a check to this credit card company. Now I can work on the next one and continue to build that confidence up.
But he has envelopes for groceries and.
Yeah, that's all great.
I tried it for a month. It was a pain.
I don't do that either. I mean, this is somewhat of that system, right? I mean, it's not an envelope, but it's you putting down what you're expecting you're gonna pay and maybe hopefully holding yourself somewhat accountable for that. You know, put your credit card in the freezer, so every time you get it out, you have to think about why you're getting it out of the freezer. All those things are for your emotional state of mind. They're not necessarily, there's no logic to put your credit card in the freezer. It's just to keep you from using your emotions. You know, so you pay a high interest rate, debt balances, you know, types of debt, some are better than others. Revolving is like your credit card debt. Those rates change, right? I mean, you can get a credit card at an introductory rate. Sometimes they'll offer you 5.69%, you know, on your credit card, and people get into that. And then a year later, it goes back up to that 12 or 13%. You know, current credit card rates are 18, 19% a lot of the time, with interest rates being as high as they are. So if you had, well, it's pretty easy math. If you had $10,000 of credit card debt and your interest rate is 18%, you're making $1,800 of interest payments in a year. You know, if you didn't pay that off, if you just kept paying the interest off. So, you know, revolving debt, not great. Fixed loans are more on line with your mortgage, right? You have to have a house. You can build up some equity in a home, things like that. So, again, we always say, just from a financial advisor perspective, pay off those higher interest rates first. Your mortgage, don't prioritize making extra mortgage payments until you have all of those other things paid off and you're actually able to save money. Oftentimes, your mortgage, if it's around, if you got it locked in 5-6 years ago, you might have it at 3.5% or less on your mortgage. One would think or hope that even in a savings account, you could get paid more than your mortgage interest payments are. So you'd be better off saving money than paying on a lower interest loan. You know, here, I don't know if I necessarily agree with this, but one debt paid off, you could split the payment to the next debt or savings. I would just keep working on debt if you're paying over 12% interest or 10% interest, because on savings, you're only going to make 3, 4, 5%. Even a great investment makes 8, 9, 10%. If you're paying interest at 10, 11, 12%, you're losing money. So you really need to get your debt paid off before you start investing. You know, a great return in the stock market is 10%. So don't get caught up in saying I need to be investing in for the future when you're paying debt payments at 12, 13, 18%. You need to get your debt paid off. Now, that's not to say that if you are in a 401k plan, that's a little different, because then your work is usually doing a match of some kind, and they expect you to participate and put in something to match that. So that's a little different scenario if you have a retirement plan at work where they're making a match requirement to get their free money. Then I say always take advantage of that match. So, because that's just the free income from your employer. You know, evaluate the budget and spending. I put a lot of the stuff people spend probably excesses on, including me. Is it really things we need, or is it things we like, or conveniences? So, as long as your budget's okay, I guess you can pay for some of this stuff, right? Some things I like to do, I like to prepare my own meals. I don't like to eat out as much, but I do have way too many streaming services. So, and I know I have one that I pay, I think it's $6.95 a month for, and I haven't been on it for probably 6 months. So there's $40 out the window. All that little bit adds up. Yeah, you know, I don't know. Garage sales, sell your stuff on Facebook. I think we all have stuff. Americans like to own things. Maybe you have things that you don't need anymore. You could certainly look at ways to raise some money that way.
Can you say garage sales with a straight face, knowing your dad and I are every week?
Right. There's always a sucker that'll buy something if you put it out there, right? So.
Oh, he's getting more selective.
He has been. I can inherit all that someday, so.
Oh, yes.
You know, here's the thing is work extra hours at work, part-time jobs, side gigs. Everybody's looking for employees. Most employers are. And there's opportunities to work part-time at many of those. You know, I ref football. I don't know if that's a side gig so much or if I did do it for my own enjoyment, but I get paid doing it. You know, if there's things that you like to do, there's opportunities to get paid sometimes to do some of those things. Maybe the neighbor needs their house cleaned. You could always offer to do that. Yard work, you know, you got to have more income than you have in expenses. So, and then stay disciplined. The plan only works if you stick to the plan. Here we'll jump into a little bit of Social Security planning. Social Security is kind of a complicated thing. You know, the first thing I would recommend to everybody is you should know what your benefits are. And to get those, you have to go to ssa.gov. When you get older in life, they might mail you some of your benefit options and things like that. But if you're not near that retirement age, they no longer send you that green sheet they used to send us. We don't get that as often as we used to. I used to get that every year. And now I don't see it ever. And maybe it's because I set up an account online, so I never see it. But I can go on ssa.gov, log in, and I can view what my future Social Security benefits will be. I can view what my disability benefits will be. I can view what my survivor's benefits would be, what my children would get, what my wife would receive if I were to be deceased. Really critical information and really important if you're going to do a financial plan to know what your Social Security is. So the first thing you want to do is you want to get on ssa.gov, set up an account. You'll have it for the rest of your life. You can also check your earnings history and make sure it's right. So they take your earnings history. They have every year that you've ever worked and have recorded that in there. It's actually interesting to go view that. You know what your full retirement age is. It's actually different based on your date of birth. So for most people, it's going to be 67. It's going to be full retirement age. For some of us, it might be 66 in 3 months, might be 66, might be 65. It's not less than 65 for anybody. It's somewhere between 65 and 67. For people born after 1966, I think it is 67. So there's a date there somewhere, but.
I did defer mine until age 70.
Yes.
And everybody was telling me I'm nuts. But the Social Security pays very well now, and I looked at my, ancestry, longevity, and I retired at 62, but I deferred Social Security until 70. The biggest thing being, your biggest expense when you retire early is your insurance, of course.
Yes, right.
That's the catch-all.
Yeah, well, and I'll get to that too. That's a great point, Karen. So you can start as early as 62. Okay, you could say at age 62, I'm going to take my benefits. Number one, if you're working and earning income, there's going to be some tax consequences, so you want to look at that. But number two, if you just started taking it at 62 and retired, you're going to get a reduced benefit from what your full retirement benefit would be. So if your full retirement age is 67, you're retiring 5 years earlier than that, it's going to be reduced by about 35%. So if you wait till 67, you get the full benefit. If you deferred, like Karen did, till age 70, it increases by 6 or 7%, I think it's almost 8% a year. So if you deferred for 3 years, you get 24% more. In your case, it was probably even more because your retirement age was younger. But so deferring is a way to collect more, but you're playing that game, right? So
Yes.
there's a break-even point. And it's going to be somewhere around 80 years old. If you live past 80, you would have been better off deferring for a total accumulation of benefits. But a lot of people can't live without their Social Security check either. So all things to plan for. The other thing is, yeah, you can retire at 62, but Medicare doesn't begin till 65. So you could retire at 62 and you're going to have to pay for insurance out of pocket, or have a way to insure yourself, or not have health insurance, which isn't a great plan. The Affordable Care Act has given some people some better options as far as premium payments go. But if you don't begin Medicare until 65, so you have to be aware of that. There also is spousal options and survivor benefits from Social Security that you should really understand as well. If you were married for 10 years and now divorced, you could collect on your spouse's benefits if you don't remarry. If you're married and your spouse's benefit is significantly more than yours, you might have an option to take half of your spouse's benefit instead of your own benefit. Those are all things you have to know, and you can talk to your Social Security administrators about that. But it's a fairly complicated manner, but the first step is to get on SSA.gov and just even know what your benefits are. And then also know what your spouse's benefits are too.
I'm sure you've heard of Susie Ortman.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, well, at the time I was choosing when to retire, I was kind of into her advice, and hers was always deferred till age 70.
I think it's pretty solid advice, especially if you have longevity in your family. I mean, if you're critically ill or
Right.
Yeah, something's not well, but if you think to yourself that you're a lot of people turn 62, say, I can retire and run to the Social Security office without any plan in place or any thought of what the next 30 years brings forward.
Mine was a spouse I retired at 62 because I had a spouse who was very ill. And so in order to spend time with your spouse, and I really feel that pay off for me because he died then when I was 65.
Yeah.
And so it was good that I took that retirement age, but you have to look at all the factors and decide what you want to do, and can you afford to do it? Is your home paid for? Will you have some type of insurance? What kind of financial situation are your children in that you might need to assist? So
it's all of those factors. So there's not one right way or wrong way. In general, I would say if you are in a position where you can do this, defer until age 70. If you have financial capabilities to do that, if you can just work another even couple years, it's easy for a banker who sits at a desk all day to say, well, just work till you're 70 years old. I don't have to do any physical labor, right? I just use my mind for the most part. Hopefully I can keep that. But if you're working in a factory, if you're on your feet, in a restaurant all day, working till 70 isn't probably a reasonable plan. So whatever your situation is, you have to know what your benefits are going to be. And that's that's really what I want you to understand is you have to understand what your Social Security benefits are going to be. And this is going to be in the news for the next 7 years at least. I don't know how long it's going to take to figure this out, but Social Security's trust fund is going to run out of money, which is this $3 trillion of excess funds they have right now to be paying existing benefits. The current benefits coming in are not enough to fund the benefits going out. So what working people are paying now does not fund what retired people are receiving. They have this trust fund that they're going to spend now, and by 2033 or so, that fund is going to be out of money. And so they'll only have what people are currently paying in to pay back out. So what they're projecting in your benefits could be less than what is projected, but it's not going to be zero. Now, it might be, the projections is it's going to be about 70% funded by current people working to people retired. So, a little scary to be totally dependent on Social Security, knowing that they're going to have to change some policies, either increase Social Security tax, increase the income limits. They only tax the first 180,000 basically of income. So maybe they'll tax those that make more. They might tax their income more and not give them more benefit. There's solutions that they need to develop, but just know that you'll hear in the news a lot about Social Security legislation, and it does affect all of us because pretty much everybody I know has some form of Social Security or has paid into Social Security. So, interesting to follow. I do my own financial plan, basically taking what they say I'm going to get at full retirement, and I just figure I'm going to get 70% of that benefit instead of 100% of it. So, that's what I've been doing. I may rethink how I do that, but that's my current planning method. Here I'm going to kind of twist into the higher level of finance, right? So we talked about budgeting and debt consolidation, and we talked about Social Security. Now we're going to talk about my favorite topic, which is investing, and then we'll finish it up with estate planning. But a lot of people sometimes compare investing to gambling, so I brought that slide in. This is maybe for a younger crowd, but basically, the more you can save early, the better off you're going to be, right? If you started saving early, this is kind of an interesting, I like these top two. If you just saved for 10 years when you were younger and then never made a contribution again at 15% a month and earning 7%, you'd actually have more money than if you saved for the later 35 years of your life, got the same return, and retired at age 65. So really those key years are earlier. The more you can save, the more you can compound on the savings. Now, when I got out of college, I was making $11 an hour. It was pretty tough to save, but I wish I would have knew this back then. I maybe would have spent a little less on beer and cigarettes and all that stuff. But, you make some bad decisions when you're younger. So just a nice chart. This is something show to your college age kids, show to younger people to say, look, the more you can save now, the more you can compound on it, the bigger difference it makes. If you do it for 45 years, if you save 15% of your income, this is just simply assumes a $40,000 salary. That's not, most people are making that nowadays. And then, of course, this is an IRA, so it's tax deferred. Basically, it's $500 a month, almost $1.8 million when you retire. Now, the other thing I tell people is, you need to consider that you're going to, people my age and younger, if you want to live a similar quality of life, you need to have a couple $1 million saved up for retirement. We all need to be millionaires if you really want to live something similar to the type of lifestyle you live now if you're making a good wage, right? So 15% a month is really kind of the lowest amount you need to be saving for retirement, especially with what I just told you about Social Security and the projections for that. So it's a little different if you're on a pension plan, but you need to know how much that pension is going to pay you, evaluate those benefits, and then also probably save an additional amount compared to that as well. And there's all kinds of retirement accounts out there. There's IRAs and Roth IRAs and 401ks and 403bs and 457s. Not important for this Finance 101, but you should talk to a financial advisor about those products and understand how they work. Where is it best to save your money? Your 401k, if you have that at work, is a great place to start because usually there's a match and the fees are really low, but you need to invest it then to earn 7% to have a projection like this too. So You know, a lot of people talk about timing the market. Don't put your money in now. The stock market's, you know, too overvalued. All of that stuff. And there's very little truth to timing the market. Basically, what determines your returns, and that should say 7 determinants of return, not allocation, but anyway. Oh, yes, okay, I got this right. I labeled that right. So really what determines your return and your future earnings is your asset allocation. Market timing is a very small factor in all of this, and security selection is only a 5% factor. Security selection is picking the investments, right? So if you meet with an investment professional and they brag about all these things that they can pick for you, it really doesn't matter. What's going to matter with that financial professional is their knowledge, their ability to help you be allocated properly, because that's the most important thing. Your financial advisor should spend 90% of their time talking about how you should be allocated, risk, reward, all of that stuff, and 10% of the time worried about all the other stuff. Because your asset allocation is going to determine your return. And how to determine your allocation is really your age, your net worth, your own personal risk tolerance, inflation, how long you're planning to be retired. Again, I find that somewhat difficult because we don't know how long we're going to live, so how do we know the length of retirement? But we can do some projections. You know, other sources of income, which is your Social Security, rental properties, farms, maybe you're working part-time, and then your expected lifestyle. And really, if you sit down with a financial advisor, give them all of those 7 things, they should be able to come back and say, okay, this is how you should be invested. But as the saying goes, scared money doesn't make money. So if your risk tolerance is, I don't want to lose anything, then your expectation is you're not going to make anything either. So if you want to protect principal, it's really tough to get good returns. You have to take risk to make money, which is returns for the future. You know, this is the 3 bucket strategy, right? And this is maybe more Susie than Dave, but you know, you talk about different buckets. You know, 6 months of security in your savings, so whatever you're spending, if you did a budget, you should know what your expenses are monthly.
Dave's baby steps.
Yep. If you have your six months of savings, you know, then you can move on to bucket 2 and start saving for retirement. Again, 401k is a little different if you have a company match, but in general, once you have that 6 months of saving, start putting money towards your retirement. Try to get yourself to 15%, and I'll even let you count your company match in there if you work at an employer that matches your retirement. 15% of your income towards retirement, and then you can start saving in your dream basket. So you're going to have, you know, short-term dreams. If you have money you know you're going to spend in 2 years, it shouldn't be in the stock market. That money should be kept safe. Put it in a CD. Just earn some interest on it. Mostly just protect the principal. If it's money that you're going to spend in 2 or 5 years, you can try some of those things there to earn a little better interest. Maybe a fixed annuity of some kind. Target a date for maturity in those short-term, mid-term dreams. And then longer-term dreams, if you're going to stretch it out 6, 7, 10, 12 years, if it's for retirement and you're not retiring for 20 years, really you need a lot of stock market exposure. Again, the risk reward is where, I mean, returns come from. You get paid the reward of investing in stocks by taking that risk. And so, you know, there's rarely, I shouldn't say never, there's rarely been a 10-year period where stocks haven't had positive returns. There's actually one in the last 75 years, and that was from 1998 to 2008. The very bottom of the 2008 crunch, the crash, was lower than what the stock market was in 1998. And that's a one period out of 600 measurable periods over a 10-year. Never negative over 15 years, never negative over 20 years. So if you're not retiring for 20 years, your money should be in the stock market that's meant for retirement. And no, the stock market is not like the casino. It's just simply not. If you spent 15 years at the poker table, I won't use poker, maybe you're a really good poker player. If you spent 15 years at the Keno table, you would not have any money left. I can promise you your experience would not go well. If you spent 15 years on slot machines, you would not have a positive balance. You would experience losses. I know there's a few people that have won, but it's pretty unlikely. So it is not like gambling. None of these are over 50%. If you're invested in the market over 15 years, you have a 19.9 or 99.9% chance of having positive returns. Even the 1 year, 74%. So if you compare it to gambling, it's not a fair comparison. Again, here's another 7 rules. I was really stuck on the number 7 when I wrote this back a few years ago. Invest you must. I think we've all heard time is your friend. They all often say it's not timing the market, it's time in the market. Impulse is your enemy. Listening to the news and then thinking that you needed to respond to that is not a solid financial plan.
Don't check your stocks continually.
Right. World events should not change your allocation. Your risk tolerance should change because of something in your life changed. Now, if the world event changed your life, then that's a situation where you might change your allocation. But basic arithmetic works. Compounding at 7%, you would double your money in 10 years, basically. If you earn 10%, you double your money in 7 years. If you earn 3%, you double your money in 23 years, 24 years. So the more you can earn, the quicker you can compound your money. Basically, you take your return and divide it into 72. But stick to simplicity. There is no silver bullet in investing, right? There is no what's the hot tip for the day. Don't get caught up in fads. Stick to the stocks and bond market that have been used for hundreds of years and return for, the stock market's been around for a long time. It's showing consistent returns. Don't just chase returns. Don't just say, okay, that stock's up 30%, so I should buy it now. Typically, the thing that performed the best last year performs the worst the following year, and vice versa. So you just want to be diversified, stick with a solid, diversified portfolio, and then, of course, stay the course. A lot of the same ideas there. And here again, just another chart. Talks about some people, age 25 to 65, if they earn 6.25%, the differences in their ending portfolio and how it was basically invested. And, so consistent Chloe invests from age 25 to 65, earns 6.25%. Late Lila starts way later, earns the same amount. She's got only half of what consistent Chloe would have. Well, Quitter Quincy just quit at age 35, and then Nervous Noah just didn't invest his money. And Nervous Noah, who didn't invest at all, is actually the worst off of everybody because he just couldn't put his money into investing. And now I just titled this Estate Planning 101. I simply broke it down into how people can inherit things, right? The order of inheritance, basically. So ownership is number 1. If you and me own something jointly, I can just, when I die, you just get it. So that's joint with rights of survivorship. Simply a pretty good estate plan. just own it together. My wife and I own everything we have together. I die, she owns it after me. Except for, she can't own my IRAs or my 401ks, some insurance and annuities you can't own jointly. They have to be owned by an individual. In that case, that's named beneficiary, or it might be called TOD, transfer on death. So I would say, 100% to my wife, name her primary beneficiary, and then perhaps your children are your contingent beneficiaries. You could name charities. You could name anybody transfer on death. Could name a friend. Intestate laws, if you didn't name anything and you didn't have joint ownership and you die with no will and you die with no trust, it goes into intestate, right? Not an ideal situation for most people. Intestate often follows bloodline and it can go backwards. So, if you don't have children and you don't have a spouse, it'll go back to your parents, then to your siblings, and that's how you hear about people inheriting from their long-lost uncle or aunt that they never met, is because intestate laws. I actually dealt with one of these that's probably been 7 or 8 years ago. It's quite interesting. I had to draw out a family tree, connect all the dots, find people that didn't even know their aunt that passed away, and they inherited a portion of her estate. I think it ended up dividing somewhere around like 23 different ways, and there was different shares per sibling to nephews and nieces, depending on all of how many the numbers were. Simple planning is a will, right? Those are written by attorneys. I guess you could do them online. You could also write them by hand. Some risk with doing any of that on your own. I guess a will doesn't have to be written by an attorney necessarily. However, I would strongly recommend getting legal advice on that. Wills will go through what's called probate. That's, it's submitted to the court reviews it, verifies it, that this is the will that will be probated, and then that probate begins.
But wills don't have to be probated.
If they're less than $100,000, they don't have to be. You have an informal probate of a will, though. Yeah.
They all have to be probated?
If it's more than $100,000 that's being transferred through the will. Yeah. Informal probate is different than formal probate.
Oh.
But it still goes to the clerk of courts.
It does.
Gets filed. Yep.
And it has to be published so many times? 3 times?
You don't have to do any of that. That's just recommended to do all that.
I thought
if you wanted to eliminate your creditor claims and stuff like that, you would publish that. Yeah. Yep. Because you could, if you didn't do a creditor claims notice, then the creditors have, I think, 7 or 5 years to come back and say you didn't give us notice. If you publish the notice, then you shut that down after the 90-day notice, or 180 days, whatever that is.
So all wills are probated.
If they're over $100,000, yep. There's something called a small estate affidavit for those under 100,000. But that's just for what's being probated. You could die with $80 million and have all of it transfer on death except for your car or something like that. Let's say you got everything else taken care of and you forgot to transfer your car on death. Well, that car is worth less than $100,000. That could be transferred by small estate affidavit.
Okay.
It's not the value of your estate, it's the value of what's being done through the will. So, an interesting thing, if you have that problem, you should talk to an attorney, right? So, but, yeah, I mean, it's not, the probate is usually an informal process. There's not like judges and court hearings and things like
It's
that.
published.
It's not even, it could be published. Those creditor notices you see in the paper are not a requirement. They're just good methodology.
All right.
You would want to publish your creditor's notice so you basically quash any opportunity for somebody to come 3 years later and say,
Rescind and say,
yeah, right.
You didn't publish it, we didn't know.
Exactly. Yep. You also usually typically would want to call like the Department of Social Services and make sure you have no liens from them, any payments to them, stuff like that. So there's things that should be done. Whether you do them is up to you as the personal rep of the will, but for the most part, good practice is doing that kind of stuff. Trusts, revocable, irrevocable. I could spend 3 weeks talking about trusts, but know that they're available as an estate plan. Attorneys write those, not trust officers. You go to an attorney to get a trust written. There's several people in town that specialize in those areas. Typically a lot of things you see would be under revocable trusts. People while they're living write a trust. They die, it becomes irrevocable. But there is situations where living people write irrevocable trusts as well. Creditor protection, special needs trusts, all of that type of stuff.
And it's expensive to have a trust written.
But
yes. You need to have it done.
Oh, I would argue the counterpoint is if you don't have a trust and you have a large estate and it's going to be probated through a will, you're going to spend quite a bit of money to do that too. The will will be cheaper to write initially, but the trust administration will be cheaper than the will, execution of that will typically, or it could then balance out.
You would know.
Well, I always say trusts are cheaper because I'm a trust officer, but I think it's probably a pretty honest experience.
Is it about a 1% fee for trust officers to facilitate a trust?
That's a good measure. Yeah, around 1%. Yeah, each trust department's a little different, corporate trustees, but yeah, you shouldn't really be paying much more than that for trust administration. And it depends on your assets and beneficiaries and all of that stuff too, but 1% is a good figure.
The more beneficiaries, the higher the interest?
Sometimes, yeah.
Okay.
It really depends on if you had hundreds of beneficiaries, the trust department is going to want to charge more than if you have 5. Right. Yeah. Since I'm in the library, I came up with 2 books that I'd like to read. I don't even think the library has these books, so I was looking at that after I said that. Kelly could probably
Let's see what we can do about that.
Great book. It's called Simple Wealth, Inevitable Wealth. Nick Murray is a well-known author in the financial advising industry. Really talks about how to make yourself wealthy if you're able to save money. So this wouldn't be about budgeting or more like Dave Ramsey or Susie. Susie does some of this stuff too, but this would more be once you're able to save money, what you should do with that money. So that would be on the investing side of things. The latte factor is the reverse of that. That's more how to save money. That's talking about don't buy the 3 cups of coffee a week, the 3 lattes a week. Don't let emotions get the best of you, And then he also wrote a book called The Automatic Millionaire, which I've never read. But anyway.
But who's in line for those lattes? It's not people in their 70s or 60s. Well, we were.
Not me either, Karen.
We didn't grow up thinking we needed a latte every day from Starbucks,
No, I understand, yeah.
I'm just like, are you kidding me? You're going to pay $6 a cup of coffee.
And the amount of money spent on energy drinks too is another thing. So and bottled water. We didn't even know what bottled water was when I was growing up.
Interesting fact about bottled water. My son had to do University of Kansas Medical Center. He had to do a study of the quality of bottled water. None of them, not one, qualified for what each state requires of the purification. He said they even took toilet water out of an airplane, and it was purer than some of the bottled water that we paid for. Yeah, it's a study they had to do, and I'm going, are you kidding me? I've been buying bottled water for,
Well, from a financial perspective, it doesn't make much sense to pay for something you can get for free, basically, right? So there it is.